Welcome back, viewers. Dave Epstein here from the Post-Pollock firm, here to talk to you today about a clip I saw on Piers Morgan. This is a clip that went viral. Involves a gentleman named, he calls himself Gary Economics, or Gary's Economics. He's a British fellow. He was a trader, apparently, and just maybe a blogger or YouTuber. But it was a very interesting interview with Gary Economics. And let me play it for you, and then we can talk about it.
If you know your history, can you point to a period in UK history, for example, where massively punishing rich people by massively taxing them has actually benefited the country?
Listen,
because I can't really.
My dad was born in 57. He worked for the post office, Royal Mail, 35 years. Never once earned more than the average wage in the country. He was able to buy a house, support a family. My parents are retired now. They own their own property. They're financially secure. That's not possible now. He lived in an era where the top rate of tax was much, much, much higher. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s in the UK, in the US, the top rate of tax on large estates was significantly higher. And in that time period, it's not a coincidence, ordinary people could afford to buy houses. They could afford to, listen, this is not normal, okay? Read your history, right? You read Charles Dickens? In this country we're talking right now, 150 years ago, ordinary men and women lived in desperate poverty, okay? That's going to happen again.
Well, there you have it, folks. Desperate poverty. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know. One thing that is clear, though, is that there is a gap, a disparity, wage disparity. There is wealth disparity. As a lawyer, I mean, I can look at this in 1,000 different ways. A lawyer, from a social context, a cultural context, a political context. And really where all this comes from and how change can be made is politically. It's who you vote for and what you want to have in your society. But what this young man is saying is really true. I grew up in a very nice suburb in northern New Jersey, and there were these beautiful old colonial homes. And if you looked up and down the streets where my friends lived, there was, a beautiful house that now goes for God knows what, where, the fireman lived or a teacher lived. Or a post office, a postal worker lived. Those days are gone. Unless you have second jobs or you have family money saved up, you're not living in these houses. In fact, it's become much, much more difficult for generations like my kids to ever be able to afford a house. We're kind of becoming a landlord's nation. Whether that's good or bad, I mean, I'm not crazy about that notion. But the question is, where does this come from? Well, for Mr. Economics or whatever, I don't know his real name, was talking about taxation. And we have this circus that we go through all the time on whether we should tax more or should tax less. This battle back and forth, how should we tax? You have people who are making billions and billions of dollars every year. And, the idea that they don't want to part with it. I can understand people who are in desperate times saying, so how much more do you need? On the other hand, the people say, well, I earned all this money. Why should I give it to you? It's all about having a civilized society. We don't want to be like Oliver Twist, where we have people desperate in the streets. The homelessness has gotten to be out of hand in certain cities. And some people say, it's their fault. Other people recognize in many instances people are mentally ill. A lot of the homeless are veterans. So where does it all come from, though? Where does the solution come from? It's all in the tax laws. It's in the tax laws and who we elect and how they spend the money. And that's this balance that we've been doing for years and years and years in this country, probably from the beginning of when we started doing income tax. What do you do? Well, the first place you can do something is voting. It may or may not make a big difference, but you can support candidates who you feel will find a balance that allows people to thrive and at the same time allows people who have already made their money to continue making their money and not get hurt too badly. But right now, unfortunately, I don't see a balance. And really, there is every new president comes in and they talk about what they're going to do with taxes. And folks, let's not kid ourselves. That matters a lot to everybody. The have-nots, people who are below a certain income level, certainly want to see taxes raised because they want to get programs going. And no, they're not all lazy. They're not all just looking for handouts. They need programs to get themselves started, to get going. You start out in desperate situations, and you don't just jump out of it like that. There are success stories. And, that's what made America great originally, that you could make something of yourself. Well, the opportunities just aren't there. So the question is, how much do we tax and who do we tax? The middle class seems to get caught up in the middle, no pun intended, and becomes collateral damage each time. And there's this dynamic of politicians playing to voters on where they're going to get the most votes, and playing to people's likes, fears, wants, and needs. But we are still in the same boat, and that is right now there is a whole generation of young Americans who will never own a house, and a much larger percentage than we've ever seen before, because a house is almost unattainable. The cost of a house, obtaining financing, it's just becoming prohibitive. And then you're at the mercy of, if you're not in a city where there is rent control, or, you don't find the landlord who's got a heart of gold, the landlord can sell the property any day, and all of a sudden you're out looking for a new place to live. And rents have gone up in the meantime. So there is a political end to this, and there's a legal end. Obviously, people contest right now. People are going to be contesting. They are contesting the cutting of government programs. They're contesting the cutting of government jobs. People have actually taken the United States government to court to challenge some of these firings, which have left many people on the unemployment line, and then many more on the unemployment line from corollary industries. You cut out a government program, it's not just the people who work in it, it's the people who work with it. I was going to say support it. Well, they kind of support each other, but the government's buying their services or wares. So all of these things combined, when you cast your vote, it's very hard to envision things in the future that are abstract. It's like, well, this person's going to do that person's going to do this. But you have to really think through what happens. And what I liked about this video is it says, know your history. I was a history major in college. I love history. And I think history, they say there's a phrase, the past is prologue, meaning the past tells you what's going to happen. And it's very true. And if you look at how things have worked in the past, legally and from a governmental standpoint, and look where we are now, look to history. Don't just dismiss history, say, well, that could never happen here, or we're different. People, we are no different than 500 years ago, 200 years ago. We have better technology, better medicine, so on and so forth. Although when more people can't get that medicine, or they can't get the shelter that past generations had, namely houses, we seem to be repeating something. So I tend to agree with Mr. Economics here that something needs to be done, and I think it has to be done through the electoral process, through the election process. How quickly can you fix that? I don't know, but we seem to be heading on a path where that problem will increase, and that all that does is lead to instability of a society, and you don't want that, folks. As far as the legal end, people take to court government agencies or government activities, actions that cut out a program or cut people's jobs out or cut out a benefit that can do something depending on whether or not that program is created by statute, and that one single person, say a president or a governor, cannot simply erase it if it's a governmentally or statutorily created job. But that's not going to solve all the problems. The bigger problems have to do with how do you find this balance between this one getting the money, that one getting the money. And then there in the United States with federal funds, there's also a dynamic of different states and different areas getting more of the federal tax dollars so that it's not simply the wealthy. It can be states that earn more, get taxed higher, but also pay larger state taxes. And yet their money, they look at the federal government's spending of their money, and they find out that more for every dollar they put in, they get 50 cents back or 25 cents back, whereas other states put in $1 and get $1.25 back. That is a disparity that is a statewide disparity that seems to be played with all the time. It's been going on for years and years and years. And everybody's pointing fingers at each other, calling each other entitlement people or this or that. But when you actually look how the money's spent, there are states that spend for their own schools and everything else, and then get murdered with taxes, and they're complaining too. And yet at the same time, those states that receive that money, they need that money to build their roads, to pay for schools. So there is a balance that has to be found, and it has to be found in the election process, in the selection of leaders. I would dare say that while we have some great leaders out there, we have also seen, in my opinion, a decline in the overall ability of political parties and political machines to produce leaders that actually have vision. And sometimes that means doing something that's widely unpopular, doing something that even your constituents, your usual political constituents, are scratching their heads with. It's doing things that are wise. That's why we want wise leaders. Sometimes they do things that we don't agree with or we don't like, but they come and they do it. And lo and behold, later on, it turns out it was a blessing. I'll give you one example. There was a governor of New Jersey named Jim Florio. He came in, I believe he made a campaign promise. I am not going to raise taxes. New Jersey, the country, was in the midst of a horrible recession at that time. He came in the first month and did this massive tax increase. It was political suicide, and I think he knew it. Because New Jersey, again, we were in the throes of a recession. But his logic was, listen, we might as well bite the bullet and pay for this and pay for it now. Now, whether you like Jim Florio or not, it really doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is New Jersey climbed out of that recession faster than most states. Massachusetts did the same thing, and they had the same result. They paid for the mistakes of whoever. There were a lot of people who made mistakes to lead that recession. But the leadership said, I don't care what I said or what I did. What I want to do now is fix this so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with it. He did. It cost him a re-election. But in retrospect, in my opinion, he bit the bullet and did the smart thing with how to pay for things. And sometimes you need that, folks. You need somebody who can come up with an idea that benefits most Americans or most Jerseyans or most Oklahomans, wherever you are. That comes in the voting booth. And that's the only place you can really make that difference. And also in who you support, who you donate to. You can do a lot of things. But I have to tell you, I like this video. I like the title, Know Your History. And folks, know your history. Try to know what has happened in the past. When you're voting for people, find out not just what they're going to do, but what the effect of what they're going to do has done in the past. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit like and subscribe, and please leave your comments. Always love to see them. Thanks a lot. Signing off, Dave Epstein.